This lady is named Eris. She's not just the only daughter of a marquis, but also happens to be the fiancée of the crown prince. Not only does she possess breathtaking beauty, but she also holds an enviable position of wealth and power. Now, you'd think she'd be every woman's object of desire? However, in this tale, she's merely the wicked villainess, nothing more than a stepping stone on the romantic journey of the main characters. In the original plot, Eris was hopelessly in love with the crown prince, but he had his heart set on the sweet and kind-hearted Helena, the female lead. Fueled by jealousy, Eris concocted a plot to poison Helena. However, whether it's due to the plot armor or Helena's infectious and innocent personality, it seemed like everyone in this story adored her. Even the High Priest, one of the main characters, spent his entire life's worth of divine power to resurrect her. After being brought back to life, Helena ended up living happily ever with the crown prince, while Eris's malevolent schemes were exposed, leading to her execution. The cliché romance novel, nothing special, that was how our main character described this book. The overly melodramatic plot didn't pique her interest much. Little did she know that one day she'd end up transmigrated into this very story, and not just as any character, but as Eris Mazarian, the vicious villainess with a tragic fate. At that moment, all our protagonist wanted was to die as soon as possible, so that she could return to her own world. Speaking of death, our protagonist had given it a try, but every time she attempted to end her life, something bizarre happened. When she jumped from a height, someone was there to catch her. The poison she drank turned into an effective sleeping aid. Even when she tried cutting her wrist, all she got was more pain. But if you think about it, it makes sense, considering that in this world, Eris can't escape the laws of causality tied to the plot. As her thoughts drifted, Eris's carriage arrived at the Imperial Palace. The guards warmly greeted her. "Good afternoon, Lady Mazarian. The prince is waiting for you." Eris responded with a dignified exterior, but she understood the person the crown prince was waiting for was not her. For she knew the prince's heart belonged only to the sweet and pitiable Helena. Even though Helena is descended from a prestigious family, she is now just a commoner. As Eris arrived, Helena eagerly welcomed her, but the crown prince remained as cold as ever. He told Helena not to be overly polite to Eris, and turned to Eris. "Isn't that right, my lady?" In the past, Eris would have likely lost her temper right there, but now her soul had changed since her reincarnation, so she remained indifferent to the prince's affectionate display toward Helena. Since the tea had grown cold and tasted bitter, Eris asked Helena for a refill. Helena kindly accepted the request, but the prince interjected, "Haven't you learned how to pour tea properly at home, or is your hand not cooperating?" Eris sensed a deliberate rudeness and decided to strike back. "Your Highness is the one who said that we are friends? Is asking your friend for one cup of tea against the law?" The prince, rendered speechless, was about to erupt when Helena intervened, consoling him softly. "That's right, Alec. I poured her the tea because she is my friend. But if you keep being so grumpy, I'm not going to pour you tea, okay?" Eris thought to herself, Helena, who has a uniquely pure and straightforward personality, is not hated by anyone no matter what she does. Instead, she is loved by everyone. As they spoke, a red-haired young man, Jason Kajar, approached and embraced both Alec and Helena. He was the eldest son of a duke, but he was more renowned as the warrior Jason, one of Elena's suitors in the original story. The three of them appeared as close friends, with Eris left standing aside, ignored. After a while, Jason turned to Eris and said, "Oh my, how rude of me, Lady Mazarian. You're as beautiful as ever." Noticing Jason's warm gaze, Eris replied politely and cawed, "It is a beautiful day, Sir Kajar." Jason told her not to be formal and call him Jason directly. Eris said coldly, "How could I, as the fiancé of the crown prince?" Hearing this, Jason looked somewhat awkward, but the prince's face had already darkened. He was provoked by the emphasis on fiancé in front of Helena. Before the prince could react, Jason reminded him that they were in public and couldn't lose their temper. But the proud crown prince would never listen to anyone, declaring, "There is no need for me to consider the feelings of others." Hearing this, Eris reminded him that there was only one person who could do something like that. Even if that were the case, it would still depend on the political opponents. The prince grew even more furious, while the other two were shocked by Eris's statement. Eris herself sensed the subtlety of the atmosphere. I'm certain Eris Mazarian was once their childhood friend, but they now completely treat me as an outsider. She pondered. My feelings could have been hurt, if I was really Eris, that is. Feeling like there was no point in continuing the talk, Eris got up and prepared to leave. Helena immediately called out to her, but this time she didn't use any titles. She simply called her Eris. You can't speak informally to His Highness in the Imperial Palace, Lady Antebellum. Hearing Eris's reply, the Crown Prince erupted in anger. Who dares to warn her in front of me? Luckily, Helena intervened in time. Watching the ambiguous atmosphere between the two, Eris couldn't be less interested. She thought, Helena is naturally kind, so she often takes the brunt of it. But there are always people loyal to her, so it doesn't matter if I don't like her alone. Early the next morning, Eris rose, instructing her maid to find a skilled oracle. She had once again embarked on her quest to figure out the way back to her original world, this time intending to combat the supernatural with the supernatural. Before departing, the maid dressed Eris meticulously while incessantly talking about a confectionery in the center of the city. Eris promised she'd bring back some cookies for everyone. Seeing the genuine smiles on everyone's faces, our protagonist began to think, everyone in this household loved Eris. Did Eris love them too? On the journey, Eris sat in the carriage, gazing outside. Along the way, she noticed people wearing firearms and street lamps crafted with magitech. Ironically, this country developed magitech and yet condemned magicians because their power didn't come from the god the country worshipped. Upon reaching her destination, Eris fumbled around the empty room when a voice came from behind. My lady, I wouldn't touch that if I were you. Turning around, Eris saw a captivating woman with fiery red hair. Eris started, If you're the real deal, you would know why I came without me saying, right? Of course, Lady Mazarian, or should I address you as the pitiful outsider? Eris stood frozen in place. After a moment, the redhead woman dragged her into a small dark room and made a bowl of seemingly dark cuisine soup for her to drink. Seeing Eris hesitate, the red-haired woman resorted to provocation. Wouldn't it align with your goals if it were poison? This tactic worked, and without further ado, Eris resolutely drank the hot soup, only to find its taste nauseating. The redhead quickly brought candy, and Eris couldn't help but think, are you giving me the antidote after you gave me poison? The redhead continued saying, you must have realized by now, I'm not just a regular oracle. As she spoke, flames of blue and purple appeared between her palms. Allow me to introduce myself. My name is Medea. I am the last sorceress of this land. Eris was stunned because there was no mention of a sorceress in the original novel. Medea continued, I am the only sorceress in this nation. Others are living far away to avoid persecution. We value individuality, so we only call each other by our first name, but everyone treats each other as sisters. Although Eris had many questions about this woman, she decided to focus on the current issue of how to return to her original world. Medea smiled and answered, if you can endure the death risk, like the one from your previous suicide attempt, we might be able to help you. But this is the first time I've met someone like you in this life, so I will have to ask for advice from my sisters, and it might take about half a month. Eris hesitated. She didn't want to endure the risk of death again. However, Medea suggested she consult the Grand Temple since it involved divinity rather than magic. Given the circumstances, it seemed like the only option was to try Medea's suggestion. Having made up her mind, Eris got up to leave. While Medea didn't ask for any payment, Eris insisted on it. I'm giving this to put pressure on you. Since your secret is more lethal than mine, believe that I wouldn't think of using that against you. Hearing this, Medea gladly accepted the reward and asked Eris to carry the mirror for convenient communication. Leaving Medea, Eris wandered aimlessly through the streets. Her emotions were mixed. The introduction of a character not in the original novel meant the story's development was now unpredictable. Suddenly, she noticed a long queue ahead. Is this the dessert shop the maids mentioned in the morning? She had promised to buy some cookies for them, but the crowd was overwhelming. Eris thought it was better to do it another time. As she turned to leave, she accidentally bumped into someone and twisted her foot. Just as she stumbled, a tall figure caught her securely. Turning around, she saw a handsome man with jet black hair and tanned skin. Eris remembered reading about him in the original novel. He was Hybris, the high priest who sacrificed all his divine power to resurrect Helena and prayed Eris would descend into hell. Aware of the plot, Eris thought, this Hybris will hate me in the future, but right now he doesn't know anything, so he seems friendly. Hybris swiftly moved to her side, asking, "Who are you?" His spear-like gaze seemed as if it could pierce through her. Surprised, Eris inadvertently held her breath, torn between confessing everything and seeking his help. But recalling that Hybris, as one of the male leads, sacrificed all his divine power in the original novel to save Helena when she got poisoned, meaning this man would become her enemy. Therefore, Eris decided not to reveal the truth for now. After all, if he found out that I'm not the real Eris, he might use me as a test subject. And if even the Crown Prince finds out, he could take me for someone crazy and send me off to a remote island. Knowing that Hybris cared a lot about others' opinions, Eris deliberately spoke loudly, saying, "You ask who I am? Is it not even more strange for a priest to be acquainted with an unmarried aristocratic lady?" The man continued to be assertive. "You know I'm not referring to your identity." Eris continued loudly, "Then what are you referring to?" Hybris awkwardly lowered his head as bystanders gathered due to the commotion. Eris, as the Crown Prince's fiancée, was quite famous, and her interaction with the High Priest in the city center drew attention. Hybris quickly called Eris to a quieter street. Still, she refused to open up, saying, "You were so harsh just now, and now you choose to stay silent?" Hybris, feeling defeated, frantically waved his hands, indicating he didn't mean to interrogate her, just got too excited. However, Eris insisted that she felt he was questioning her. The man had to apologize, saying, "It seems I misunderstood. I'm sorry." Eris accepted his apology and walked away without looking back. However, back on the carriage, she regretted her decision. If she had known, she should have seized the opportunity to inquire. After all, she rarely had the chance to get close to the Grand Temple. And perhaps, there she could find the answers she sought. Rather than accepting the risk of death again to return to her world, she could plead with the man who would hate her in the future. But thinking that she had only casually read the original novel and didn't know the subsequent developments, Eris could only silently pray to meet Hybris again as soon as possible. Returning to her mansion at night, the guards quickly came up to assist her off the carriage. It will soon be the knight ordination ceremony. Are you not planning to choose a personal knight again this year? Hearing that a personal knight, depending on the situation, could not only handle public affairs, but also assist with private matters, Eris found it enticing. However, thinking that she was about to leave this world, she gave up the idea. The guard expressed regret, saying, "There is an overflowing number of people who wish to become your personal knight. Dedicating one's life to a beautiful lady is a knight's romantic dream. But the current Eris is a woman from the modern world who has received advanced education, so she does not subscribe to such views." Are they saying there's no value to dedicating one's life to a lady who isn't beautiful? I don't want to be someone's romance, nor do I want to bear the weight of that life. Early the next morning, Eris leaned on the balcony, recalling the reasons Hybris, the High Priest, fell hopelessly in love with Helena. It turns out that Hybris, despite being a high priest, had a sweet tooth, but due to his noble status, he had to suppress his nature. Observant Helena noticed Hybris's dilemma, always finding excuses to call him out of the Grand Temple to share her delicious desserts. Thinking about this, Eris realized that when she encountered Hybris loitering near the dessert shop yesterday, it meant he hadn't fallen in love with Helena yet. Realizing this, Eris decided to take the initiative. Even though I have no intention of taking Helena's love, but there is no way Hybris would help Eris if he falls in love with Helena. To find a way back, I must try again at the dessert shop to see if I can meet him. Eris was about to leave for yesterday's dessert shop when a maid suddenly informed her that the emperor had sent a message for her to enter the imperial palace. In the palace, it turned out the emperor specifically instructed Eris to hold her coming-of-age ceremony at the imperial palace. This was an unprecedented honor, but it wasn't because the emperor cared much for Eris. Instead, there were a lot of rumors circulating about how the crown prince cherished the commoner, Helena, and despised Eris. This also insulted Eris's father, the Marquis Mazirian. The engagement between the crown prince and Eris was originally a political move by the emperor to form an alliance with the nobility. So, the emperor wanted to use this coming-of-age ceremony to publicly declare that there was no issue with their marriage. Eris didn't want to waste words, since everything would go as the emperor wished. However, the emperor signaled Eris to come closer and asked about Helena. While the emperor seemed to blame the crown prince for his recklessness, Eris knew that although the emperor now appeared kind, he was a ruthless man who killed his own eldest son in the original novel. The reason the empress survived was because she was carrying the current crown prince, Alec. Eris knew she had to be cautious when dealing with the emperor. The emperor asked if she was jealous of Helena. Eris calmly replied, "No." "Very well." The emperor held Eris's hand and said, "A man's love is rarer than a seasonal flower. What's more important than love is that the power of that man's position will be conferred to you. I've already arranged with your father. In the future, you will ascend to the position of crown princess and eventually become the empress." Eris understood the emperor's words. On the surface, his words seemed to be placating, but they were actually meant to intimidate her, implying that she must become a member of the royal family. However, the emperor miscalculated. The current Eris was an outsider who didn't care about the fear of death or the fate of the Mazirian family. Leaving the emperor, Eris walked through the palace, lost in thought. Suddenly, she was attacked from behind. Startled, she turned around, forcefully shaking off the hand on her shoulder, only to discover that the person who attacked her was Helena. Although Eris scolded Helena for being careless in the palace, she still helped her up, worried that the imperial doctor, who only treated members of the royal family, would refuse to bandage her. However, Helena innocently smiled and said, "The imperial doctor likes me." Eris couldn't help but self-mockingly say, "It seems I worried for nothing. I'm the one who needs to be cared for. If Helena, who is so favored by the crown prince, gets hurt, I might be convicted." Thinking this, Eris turned and walked away, but Helena explained from behind that she just wanted to get closer to Eris. She asked if Eris had any resentment because of the crown prince's closeness to her. Eris was speechless. Firstly, a man like the crown prince wouldn't interest her even if he were given to her. Secondly, recalling from the original novel that Helena only had memories of Alex and Jason, and although Helena now claimed to consider Eris a friend, the original novel did not mention memories of their friendship. Eris decided to state her position, saying, "Let's end our friendship." As the two girls spoke, Eris suddenly felt a grip on her shoulder. She turned around and saw that the crown prince was interrogating her angrily. "Lady Mazirian, you really haven't changed at all. You're becoming more shameless." Eris replied, "This is a virtue of those who have a high status." The crown prince continued angrily, "Do you dare to discuss status in front of me?" Eris responded confidently, "Because it's me. I can discuss status in front of you, Your Highness. After all, we are engaged." Helena pleaded with the crown prince to stop, saying it was all her fault. Still, the crown prince noticed her injured hand and asked, "Who hurt you?" At this moment, an unknown maid suddenly jumped out, accusing Eris of pushing Helena. Eris was speechless. Although she accidentally pushed Helena, why didn't the maid mention that Helena had attacked her first? However, before Eris could react, she felt a fiery sting on her face. It turned out the crown prince had slapped her in front of everyone. Helena was shocked, and Eris couldn't help but trembled uncontrollably. She didn't know if she was too surprised or too angry. "Did I just get slapped?" she wondered. "Since you blemished my possession, it's only fair for me to leave a scar on you in return." "Don't you think so, Lady Mazirian?" the crown prince said coldly.